All right. It being 6:15 on Tuesday, May 13th, 2025, we will begin our sixth fiscal year 2026 budget for the Committee of Ways and Means. Please stand for a pledge of allegiance and remain standing for the moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for a moment of silence for all those who serve in our military at home and abroad and for their families. Thank you. Okay, we are set up upstairs this evening, so please bear with us. We have to pass the mic around. We have a competing meeting downstairs for the planning board. So thank you to Chief Cahoon and Chief Viola and their teams for being with us this evening. But before we get going, Clerk Semino, can we have a roll call, please?
Councilor Barrica?
Here.
Councilor Moran?
Here.
Councilor Flaherty?
Here.
Councilor Mayfield?
Here.
Councilor Reynolds?
Here.
All right. We have no approval of minutes this evening and no old business. And just as a reminder for residents, our annual town meeting will be held on Tuesday, May 27th at 7 p.m. That will be a public hearing. The council will take public comment and it will be on the budget. If you have questions or comments between now and then, please email towncouncil@braintreema.gov. All right. With that, we will get rolling. Do we have a motion to take off the table Order 25018 and Order 25006?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That is unanimous. All right. Thank you again to Chief Cahoon and his team for being here this evening. Chief, if you want to lead us off with any preamble?
Sure,
The floor is yours.
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair, esteemed members of Ways and Means. We're happy to be here tonight. I have with us Sergeant Corey Chambers Detective Sergeant Corey Chambers, but he also has an ancillary duty in administration and finance, and I also have Mary Kenny, who runs all things money in our PD. They do a great job. Truly couldn't do it without them, so happy to have them here. And I'll roll into a little introduction on the budget, and then happy to take your questions after that. So, with the support of Mayor Joyce and her staff, the BPD is pleased to announce and propose our FY26 operating budget for Ways and Means consideration. This budget was compiled based on guidelines set by the Mayor's office and also municipal finance. So we'll have a brief summary where I'll talk about overview, headcount and staffing, overtime, operating expenses, and we'll talk a little bit about the grants that we pursue, although outside of our budget. I think it's important because we aggressively go after some of those things that really save the taxpayers' money. So I think it's important to hit briefly on that and be happy to answer questions on it. Also, we were trying to get you this document. I think you got it Friday, maybe over the weekend, that my team put together on the summary, and then you have three appendices there. One is the year-over-year budget summary, and another is the year-over-year headcount analysis, and finally you'll have a year-over-year flux analysis with all general ledger accounts and explanations for any changes, or big changes anyway. So the overview. The budget proposed for the Braintree Police in FY26 is $14,763,353. Which represents about a 1% reduction over FY25 revised, which also, as you guys are very well aware, incorporated the override funding. With our headcount and staffing, this document is already aged because we prepared it on Friday. So the headcount that we had on Friday was 83. I had an officer come in on Monday and retire that we weren't anticipating. We were anticipating, but we didn't know when. So the head count is down to 82. Of that 82, 5 of them are recruit officers in the police academy. We will not see them impacting our budget, positively anyway, until probably September, so into FY26. So with those 82, now you're down to 77 working bodies. I have 2 officers they're out on long-term leave. So I really have 75 working bodies. So this time last year, we had 85 sworn personnel on the books coming to work. Right now, we have 75 coming in, but the head count is 82. There are currently 7 sworn vacancies budgeted for FY26, and we've been working with the mayor's office. We have a hiring process undergoing right now. To tell you a little bit about that, we sent out 85 cards, which we call them cards, but they're really emails now from civil service. Of the 85, 15 people signed. Of the 15, 7 people are being considered for 5 jobs. So whether we get 5 or not, I don't know. We won't know that until we start evaluating the candidates. We are not going to lower our standards just because we need bodies, but we are definitely suffering from the same hiring issues that everybody across the state is suffering from, and it's just tough to attract good candidates. With that said, the mayor's office has allowed us to pursue lateral transfers again. Same boat, a lot of people aren't leaving. It's a very lean market out there. So we're gonna try to do another push to see if we can get some laterals too. What happens with a lateral is we have somebody infused into our operation with 4 to 6 weeks. Because you get a seasoned officer, they come in to do abbreviated field training, and hopefully we're able to do something like that coming up. But 2, 3, 4 years ago, people were knocking on our door all the time. Today, it's not happening. We're not just, nobody's coming into law enforcement. I shouldn't say nobody, but there's not the numbers we used to see. So those 7 vacancies will also, they'll end up being more because we anticipate some more attrition through the year. And I'll get to that in a minute. We also have a records vacancy that we did not fund in this upcoming year. We had to make some sacrifices, and that was not funded last year. We decided to do that again with municipal finance. We'd love to explore that later, if not in the following fiscal year, or even try to do something unique with that department, but it's definitely a glaring deficiency for us. So we talked about the 5 in the academy. They're coming out June 13th. We won't see them until late September. We did have 2 lateral transfers recently that we brought on board. A third that was hired off the list already had an academy, so in essence, it was like bringing on board a lateral. So that really helped us quite a bit during the fiscal year of FY25, and we're looking to do kind of a similar thing. So we also fund through a DMH grant, and I'll talk more about grants at the very end, but the DMH grant is important because there's several positions that it funds. So one is a CIT clinician, which is basically a subject matter expert in our CIT, which is a training unit. We have a CIT admin assistant who does all administrative duties, does scheduling, does logistics for training. We have 2 JDP clinicians, which are our co-responders. That's the meat of our co-responder program, and they do a fantastic job, and we have 1 part-time domestic violence advocate. We budget for 9 full-time civilian dispatches within our budget, obviously, and we have 4 administrative staff. I talked about the 1 vacancy that we did not budget for this year. We also have an animal control officer and a half of a parking enforcement officer. So we have a parking officer for 19 hours a week. That's all represented in this budget. And we talked about what we can anticipate through attrition and retirements this year. There's always what we can anticipate, and then there's always surprises, right? So we're looking at 3 to 5, even 5 maybe to 7 officers we may lose in FY26. And the reason why I highlight that is you're going to see in a minute that we did not anticipate as many retirements and otherwise attrition rates that we got in FY24. But we'll get to everybody's favorite subject. That's the overtime. Always has been something that we focus on throughout the year, but particularly in budget time, to see what we can do. This total proposed overtime budget is $1,798,421. So almost $1.8 million, which is about a 6% increase over FY25, which was about 1.7. So this budgeted amount is still well within industry standards. That's indicative of a healthy operation, with 12% of the total operating budget, 13% of personnel costs. And I note this number because it doesn't reflect any potential salary increases either, as the collective bargaining agreements get underway. But we did build in a little bit. We think we have maybe some offset as we get towards the end of the year. We'll know better, but we're just not sure how that's going to impact overtime rates. So talking about FY25 and budgeting for that number, we're going to hit that number probably plus or minus 1%, I would imagine. That's these guys forecasting, which is second to none. They're the best in the business. So the overtime, but we didn't all arrive there at the same way. So last year, as you remember, was a unique year. At the very beginning, we were worried about losing offices to even layoffs before we had the override passed. Once we got and that number was a scary number. If we had to make that decision, it would have been devastating to the PD, to public safety, to the city. So it would have been very difficult. Fortunately, we didn't have to do that. So what began as a money problem, by not knowing whether we were going to have the override money, ended up being a bodies problem about midway through the year, even before that, because of the higher than normal attrition rates. We lost 11 offices last year, which we did not anticipate. We probably anticipated like 4 to 5. And that was, we had some mitigation strategies in effect for the possibility of not having the override. We kept most of them in place for a couple of reasons. Number one, we were given a number by municipal finance and the mayor's office and you folks that we had to stick to, and knowing we didn't have the safety net of relying on a supplemental. And it was the first time we have done that in a long time. And it was my first complete budget, so it was something that we wanted to make sure we were hitting the number, that we're accomplishing our mission with the approved budget. Secondly, when we started losing folks, it became, I said, like a bodies issue, so it became human capital was the problem. So the second mitigation strategy that we kept in effect was all of the specialty disciplines save 2, which was one evidence guy and a tech guy. The tech guy runs the entire police department, everything that we do, and the evidence function is such a high liability area that we couldn't pull him out, needed some presence there. We did not fill one evidence position, evidence of property. We rotated folks into patrol to cover overtime shifts for 9 weeks at a time. Now, it helped us immensely on saving on overtime, but even more importantly, because we had the override funding, it helped on human capital. Because if we would have been crushing our patrol division if we didn't do that. And we were rotating 3 or 4 folks, sometimes 5, for 9 weeks at a time. Now, and they weren't from extra places. They were from critical mission sets that we have in the department. Traffic, detectives, drug unit, evidence property, which again, we had only one person in there, licensing, court prosecutor, accreditation, professional standards. So it was really a sacrifice. So these guys and girls throughout the year made some significant sacrifices, not just the folks that rotated in, but even the other people that we couldn't do everything that we wanted to do. I'll give you another example. The training we moved to online. Now, while the MPTC has done a pretty good job of doing remote training, I'll be coming from a training background, it's not ideal. We didn't want to do that, but we had to. Instead of sending officers off for 5 days and backfilling their jobs and paying them when they were not on duty, we had them doing the training online. And it was definitely a sacrifice, not the ideal. I don't want to do that again. So again, why that number looks like it does, and you have I think it's a 6% increase or something like that. So anyway, we got through the year fairly well on FY24, but the staffing outlook for FY26, as I hit at the beginning, is not going to be materially different than the current year. We're going to still have hiring challenges. We're going to still have some retirements, and we'll, of course, probably have some attrition that we don't anticipate. But that's kind of the snapshot of what our overtime budget looks like for this year and why it is what it is. Operating expenses were still very lean. We are 93% personnel costs, so the rest is 7%. The operating budget is very lean. These numbers are accurate to the best of our ability, and they're in line with industry standards, but again, pretty lean. And then finally, I'll get just to the grants and external funding before we go to your questions. So we continue to maintain, aggressively pursue any grants, external funding, whether it's legislative earmarks, which we rely on it for a lot of programs, but the bulk of which is the CIT TTAC Jail Diversion Program. That's the DMH grants. I am happy to report to you all, I'm not sure how much you were tracking this, but in the governor's budget, they slashed that by 80%, those monies that came out of the governor's office. It wasn't materially different on the House's version. However, the Senate did. It went from what we projected to be about $18.5 million down to 3.8, which would have probably wiped out co-responder, at least CIT, if not co-responder. The Senate had refunded that up to 15.5 million. So we're cautiously optimistic that that's going to be adopted by the Joint Committee and then signed by the governor. I know there are amendments out there. We'll be tracking that very closely because we rely a lot on that. And quite frankly, it's changed the way we do business. So it's not something that we'd like to absorb this year. Michael doesn't want to hear that. Nobody wants to hear that. We don't want to absorb those monies, but it's something that I think is a crucial addition to our whole mission set. So we've got CIT, TTAC, jail diversion, DMH backfill. That's all in the same REL, which is JDP, Jail Diversion Program, out of DMH. We do municipal road safety. We get 911 monies. We have body armor grants. We have JAG burn grants. Shannon we got last year. We're going to get it again this year. That allows us to do some outreach to our kids. And LEAP program. And, you know, we have the port security. And then the legislative earmarks. The legislative earmarks, our congressional delegation has always been pretty good to us. And it allows us to pay for things that otherwise would have been out of our reach. And we're doing the same thing this year with that. So we hope to have that again this year. With that, I look forward to answering any questions you may have from me, and also Corey and Mary. And I have a pretty good thumb on the pulse of it, but I probably will not speak as eloquently as these two. So if we get really into the weeds, or ask them directly, I'll be happy to have them answer. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Chief, and Detective Sergeant Chambers and Mary. So, because I'm very appreciative. It's always well organized and super clear. So thank you so much. All right, with that, who would like to begin the questioning? Councilor Maglio? Okay, 1 second. The mic is coming your way. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. So I have a couple of questions, more just a little bit more explanation because I got a little lost on some of those things. One of the things I got a little lost on was when you talk, well, actually, let me just go in sequence of the order that you discussed. So the domestic violence part-time advocate. The question that comes up for me is, what kind of services and supports does that part-time DV officer have available when they respond to a situation that involves domestic violence?
So she comes in about 2 days a week for limited time, and it's pretty much relegated to follow-up only. She does not respond with the FSU. So it's follow-up, it's advocacy, it's guiding people through the process, it's reaching out after incidents to make sure they're exploiting any options available to them, that type of thing. And that.
Okay, and when you say process, is it to follow up with a legal process for her to be, or for whoever the victim is to be safe, or is it, like, what process? What do you mean?
All of that. So
okay.
Our job is to keep them safe. Their job is to make sure that we're doing our job as well, and to navigate them through if a person goes for a restraining order or they haven't done it yet, she would help that person navigate through that process over at the courthouse. She would answer any questions related to the prosecution if there was anything like that. She would call and make sure that there any services she could refer them to, just make sure any victims are tracking that.
So local services at this particular nonprofit or that nonprofit, sort of whatever this person needs,
Correct.
Essentially.
Yes, ma'am.
And what kind of a caseload does this officer carry?
It fluctuates, but it's fairly busy. But she's not just dedicated to Braintree. I'm not sure where else she comes from, but she comes from Dove.
Oh, she's from Dove.
Correct.
Okay, all right. So that helps a lot. So then all the services that Dove
Correct.
has is something that she can connect the individual to.
It's
Okay.
bringing a higher level of care inside of our building.
Okay, excellent, excellent. And just any sense of numbers at all in terms of,
I don't have them available. I can tell you that we respond to quite a few domestic disturbances. Whether they result in arrest or prosecution is case-by-case basis, but I don't have the numbers in front of me now.
okay, so I would ask, at some point later, once things calm down a little bit, I think it would be really, it would be informational and helpful to know how many occurrences we have. And just whatever data you have, however rough or raw it is, it would be, I'd really love to know what the level of need is, and if we're meeting it, or, that when I think I hear about, part-time advocate, I think that's also a great place to put some resources, should we ever have any. Okay. And now the parking person, the 19 hours a week, is anyone tracking the revenue from the parking tickets? I know that the Commission on Disabilities asks for updates when there's, people are parking in handicap spots, but I'm just wondering, is there any sense of are we even charging people tickets?
Are we charging them tickets?
Yeah.
Yes.
And are they paying?
That's up to Treasury. They track that.
Okay.
We don't get involved in that.
Okay, so I would ask to find that out. How many, because there were a number of years in a row that there were all kinds of tickets that were being written, but not a single one had been actually paid. And I think it's just good to know that. And if we're doing this as an awareness thing, fine. But if we're doing it as fines and violations, then somebody should be looking to collect those. You mentioned that this was your first year of going through the process. You knew there was no supplemental that was coming, and you had to really stick to those numbers, and you mentioned some strategies to do that. That's where I got a little bit lost. You talked about the 5 weeks and the 9 officers and the rollover. Could you just go through that very high level just one more time for me?
Sure. So the two that I mentioned that stand out the most is the rotation of specialty officers into patrol and transitioning our in-service training to online on-duty only.
Right, okay.
So I'm sorry if I was unclear on that, but.
No, it's me, it's not you,
So I wouldn't be so sure.
as they say.
So the specialty positions rotating in was something that we came up with in order to supplement the patrol division, where we have minimum manning based on public safety and officer safety. We were down at minimum or below minimum on every shift. So even when everybody came in, there would be an overtime. So what we did is infuse them with specialty positions who generally are senior officers who have meritoriously made their way into a position. We pulled them out of whatever their schedule is and assigned them to a shift. So now they were working on a 4 and 2, holidays, weekends,
Gotcha.
for 9 weeks at a time. So then that was to infuse those shifts or teams with extra bodies so that we didn't have to fill those on overtime.
Okay,
Now,
gotcha.
The good thing is it saved from a bunch of forces in the human capital. It also probably saved some money. The bad thing is it took away from all those specialties that aren't extra. They're
Like?
crucial to the mission.
Specialties like?
Traffic, detective, all the follow-up. So like Corey can tell you when he was in detectives, there was times that he was in there that we'd have major cases break. And we didn't have the numbers that we normally have to investigate these crimes. So we'd have a fatal accident, or we'd have whatever it was, that usually takes all hands on deck. Now we're down bodies, because they were in patrol. Traffic, same thing. So.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, thank you. The only other thing I had for right now is the 3 million less in the governor's, that the Senate restored.
Yes.
You mentioned that it'll be tougher with less, but I'm just wondering, how will that actually hit? How many towns split this money up? How much do
There's
we
a
get?
few. Well, we're a CIT Tech, one of 7 in the state. So a CIT Tech, if you remember, is Crisis Intervention Training, Technical Training and Assistance Center. It's a mouthful.
I totally remembered that.
You totally did. We train cops from this area all the way down to the Cape in CIT.
That's right. Yeah.
One of the things that we, in the goals, you'll see we want to get to 50% everybody CIT trained. We were shooting for like 17. We're up to 30%. But that was even an abbreviated year because we didn't run as many classes. But that monies represents what DMH can fund, how we deploy that, and we submit a budget to them, what our wish list is, and then they tell us what we get. So the priority would be co-responder. Those are the folks that are going out to the calls. Those are the folks that are bringing that higher level of care on site in acute situations. The CIT is, I wouldn't call it extra because it is now crucial that everybody has this training, but we can't afford to do it. And we can't afford to do the co-responders, really. We would have to absorb it. In my position would be, we'd have to absorb it. Mike doesn't want to hear that, and I don't blame him, because it's bodies. But if we get it from DMH, that's great. I don't know how that's going to realize. That 3 million, deficit, there was estimates of what we would need, 18.5 to 20 something across the state. I don't know what that 3 million would represent as far as
Okay.
the lack of services.
Okay. Really helpful, thank you. I may jump back in, but I'm going to pass it along. Thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
Who, would you like to go next?
Sure, I just have a couple questions. Good evening, Chief and
Evening,
staff.
sir.
Good to see you all again. Okay, so I'm just a couple of quick questions. The training you just mentioned, Braintree Police Department provides trainers for other organizations, other PDs. Do your folks get compensated for that?
Through the DMH grant.
Through the DMH
Correct.
grant? Okay, very good. And, all right, that answers that question. Thank you for the explanation on the sworn personnel. Certainly can understand the correlation between a shortage of patrol personnel and what it means to your overtime, and that's the largest chunk of your overtime budget. The police matrons, I see also you've got a pretty significant cut there, 2 million roughly, something less than that. Yeah, less than that, $1.5 million. Is that just a turnover, or is that can you just explain that one a little bit? The reason I asked that,
Yes.
specifically the matrons perform the functions of like school crosswalk safety, that kind of stuff? No?
That's the traffic supervisors. They're now in the school's budget. The matrons, what they do is if we have a female prisoner, they'll come in and process that prisoner for us.
I see.
So there's a couple of reasons for that, that we can anticipate. We didn't do a deep dive in it, but one, we have a lot of our new hires have been female officers. So if we know if someone's going to be getting bailed, we generally will not hire a matron because we can have a female officer process that female prisoner. And if they're going to be leaving, we don't hire somebody for 4, 8 hours, whatever
Got
it may be. And generally newer officers work later. So the availability of personnel, just having them on those shifts, I think we have 3 female officers on nights, something like that. So matrons usually work overnights, things like that. If we have a prisoner staying through, they're not bailable for whatever reason, protective custody even, we'll hire a matron. The availability of matrons has we haven't been able to hire as many as we would like. We've had some workhorses in the past. We have some great ones now, but the number has shrunk a little bit. And there was a couple of other reasons we looked at, right? Or was that it? Yeah, lower. Yeah, so that yeah, the number of female prisoners has gone down. No explanation for that. I couldn't venture to guess. And that number that we're in now is based off what we spent real in FY25.
Got it. Thank you. So that's a little innovative fielding of and spread of your officer corps. I think I recall this past year you hit a milestone, didn't you, of all female shift patrol,
Sure did.
right?
Yeah.
That's outstanding.
Yeah, it's been good.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that. For the moment, Madam Chair, that's the questions that I have. I'll pass this along. If there are other questions, I certainly will request.
Thank you.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, ma'am. How are you?
Doing good. So I was looking at the trends and metrics that are listed in the budget book, which are on page 127. And this budget book is different this year because it started to include this kind of data, and I find it tremendously helpful for understanding, why the budget is construed the way that it is. And so in these metrics, we see from FY23 to FY24 a 1,447 jump in the number of calls that are made. And then from 24 to, well, we're not finished with 25, so it's really hard for me to extrapolate where we might be.
Right.
But then we're going to get up 3,000 by FY26. And then the mental health calls seem to have dropped from 23 to 24, but now we're looking at an increase of 70. So the question that I have first is, how do you develop these trends and metrics? Like, how do you determine what your expectation is going to be? What's that based on?
So I'll just note, just for clarification, on FY25, that was prepared at October 30th, I believe, when we put those numbers together.
Okay.
For the budget book, which is why you see only a portion, a third or even a quarter of what
Yeah.
we could expect for the rest of the year. For the targets, it's trends. Some of it's anecdotal, but not all. We are seeing a lot more mental health calls in the last couple of years, and that's just, I think, across all departments, all across the state, probably across the country. And it's maybe because we're focused more on that and classifying calls properly and spending a lot more time to give the services that we need to in those. But there's definitely been an uptick in that, a dramatic uptick in my opinion, since even the pandemic. Pre-pandemic, I didn't see as many of those. And again, that's more anecdotal, just speaking now, but the call volume itself has been not rapidly, but increasing year over year since the pandemic. Because what we had is in 2019, we were probably close to 30,000, and it came dramatically down. And then as things started opening again, it started coming up. So if we had more years to kind of show that ladder, I think it may make a little bit more sense. The mental health calls, they are what they are, but we believe they're going to increase just based on what we've been dealing with.
Okay, so then in correlation to the mental health calls, I agree, it's probably a mixture of like better classification combined with perhaps some remaining mental health issues that we've been uncovered since the pandemic. But when we look at goal number 3 on page 125, that asks for officers to have more tools and skills and options to handle those kind of critical incidents for people with diminished capacity due to a mental health or behavioral crisis. And that says that the timing for it is at end of FY 2025, and so far we're 17% trained. And I'm wondering, is there a delay that was unexpected, or we further along since this was printed?
No, we had an aggressive outlook on that. So let me just start by saying this is crisis intervention training, which is the week-long course. Every officer has mental health first aid, which is a 2-day course. This is ICAT. I'm sorry. This is ICAT, which is a 2-day course. This is a new course, brand spanking new. We had CIT training. If you remember, years ago, we signed on to what they call the One Mind campaign, which is what they want every officer trained in mental health first aid. That is, if you will compare that to a first responder, EMT, paramedic, that's the first responder. The CIT class is almost like the paramedic. So we have an inordinate amount of officers trained in the full week CIT class. I don't know exactly what the number is to date, but it's higher than most around here. I think it's probably 50-60%. But the ICAT just was developed in 2023. So the ICAT is put on from Police Executive Research Forum. Have you heard of PERF? So it's a company it's a think tank head by a guy named Chuck Wexler, who's an industry guru and law enforcement started in Boston, civilian policing mind. Perf does the SMIP school every year, which is a 3-week school at BU that gets cops, executives from all over the country and the world. Perf developed this ICAT, which is Integrated Communications, Assessment and Tactics. It's a de-escalation training. And the reason why this was selected from many different de-escalation courses by not only our team, but ultimately DMH signed on to that to be the ICAT training, to be the de-escalation training covered under this grant. So our offices were some of the first offices that went to Decatur, Illinois, paid for completely by this grant and actually by ICAT, by Perf itself, that would train the trainer so they could come back and start teaching ICAT. They developed, along with DMH, a curriculum on that. So what we were hoping to get, and we thought we'd hit more last year, we didn't anticipate the budget issues that we were going to have last year, number one. So I couldn't put as many officers in that training because I'd be pulling them out of patrol and have to fill their shifts with bodies I didn't have. So there was a little bit of stumbling block then, but I will give you an update that it's not 17%, it's 30% right now. Because towards the end of the year, we were able to fund a couple of classes, again, through DMH, but we were comfortable with our staffing enough that we can get enough officers in that. So we probably have 30-something officers trained in ICAT, which is a brand-new program. I hope.
Okay, and will you continue with that as you're able to?
As long as we get the funding from DMH.
Yeah.
Because that's part of the CIT.
Yeah. Okay, and then you also have, for your FY 2026 goals, you have body-worn camera program. And you are the expert on body-worn camera. But I think that there's two different kinds of costs that this is associated with. And one is the cost of the hardware, the equipment itself that is worn. And then the other cost has to do with the data storage, where the footage is preserved for some probably long period of time. And can you talk about the cameras and the virtues that they have, but like you buy the camera once, but then you have to pay for the storage long term. So can you describe that a little bit?
So, yeah, I'm glad you asked that. You're not incorrect. That was traditionally the issue, was the cost of storage. Today, they've rolled that into a subscription model. So what you end up getting is you sign on to like a 5-year deal, the storage is included. So the subscription model, similar to when we bought the tasers last year, when I came before you guys to get the Taser 10 and the virtual reality headsets, that was based on number of officers, extrapolated through the time of the contract and how much it was going to cost per officer. It's the same thing with the body-worn cameras now. So it doesn't mean it still costs a lot of money, but what you get is you get obviously new cameras at the outset. You get about halfway through the contract, you get a refresh. And at the end of the contract, I think you get another refresh. Depends on the company, but most of them are adopting that model. So we've had a lot of internal discussions on how we're going to pay for that. Not going to be cheap. There are grants available. However, the Mass grant they haven't advertised that yet. I don't know what the status of that is or whether it's going to happen or not. I think with the state budgetary issues that we're having, when they're trying to fund certain things, we may be out of luck with the state grant this year. The Fed grant is paused. So whether we can, and then in addition to that, there will be some collective bargaining issues that we'll have to go through and labor issues that we'll have to agree upon because it is a change in working conditions. So there's some hurdles to jump through. Again, aggressive timeline because it's going to get to a point if we're not already there. Where it's not it's a public expectation. We get FOIA requests all the time for our body camera footage that we don't have. So we want them. The officers aren't opposed to them. It's definitely a change. I think it does way more good than bad, so to speak. Way back in the day, it was offensive. It's like, oh, you don't trust us. But it's not that. It shows people the work that we're doing. One of the biggest problems we have is showing people what we do and how well we do it. And if I have footage to show, it speaks volumes. And then it also diminishes some of we get frivolous complaints all the time. If I have video, those are flushed, and it's lessening up on, some of the stress that the officers go through if they're under an investigation for something they didn't do. And it also gives us, we usually have it right there. There are limitations. It isn't a panacea by any means. It's a two-dimensional video. Focus of attention isn't considered. So you have no idea what an officer's looking at, but it's definitely beneficial and definitely something that we want. We want it bad. It's depending on whether we can afford it and get through the labor issues.
I think it's brought an interesting change to the industry, so to speak. In your introduction to the budget, the memo that was supplied to us, you reference industry standards pretty often. For example, in the overtime segment, you talk about how industry standards would support using between 10% and 15% of personnel costs. And that would be between 1.48 million and 2.05 million for us. And since you come in at 1.798 million, you are right in there. But I guess I would be interested to know, how are industry standards calculated and agreed upon?
I wish I knew the answer to that. I know they're in publications, but I don't know how they arrive at those numbers. That's something that we have been traditionally, I think it was lower probably 15 years ago, maybe with the expanded scope of services that we do. We're asked to do an awful lot in our scope of duties, expertise, what we're supposed to handle. There's a lot of things that we do that we weren't traditionally part of law enforcement. And then also talking about, we'd mentioned about the mental health calls, and FY '23 and '24 about the same, and we anticipate an uptick. Those, when I was on the street 25, 30 years ago, I wouldn't spend 45 minutes at a call. That's not uncommon today. And when that accounts for, in a month, if we have 10% of our calls have some kind of diminished capacity associated with it, there's a lot more time being spent. So the scope of duties being so much more wide, that maybe that number has increased. I don't know how, Corey's a numbers guy, Mary's a numbers guy, I'm not sure how they arrived at that number, but what I do know is we fall within that metric.
Okay, those are my questions for now. If I think of something, I'll let you know.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty.
Good evening, Chief, Corey, Mary. Corey, how long have you been an officer now at Braintree?
Coming up on 12 years, I believe.
Oh, God, time flies. Really, this is I feel like in a very good way inundated with information tonight. I mean that in the most positive sense. I mean, there's a variety of different ways that you're articulating how this budget is going to be used, your goals and objectives. I'm pretty old school in how I look at it, and I just look at programs and departments. So I'm going to be working off of the line items and asking my questions. And some are going to be, just quick answers, and some might require some more articulation. In your administration budget, you're showing a marked increase in request for cell phones. Is this,
Hold on.
Typically, we split up the cell phone bill to be iPads and cell phones, and we decided to just migrate it into one account this year.
Okay, yeah, I figured it was just some sort of a change. And I'm anticipating that there'll probably be a similar answer. I'm gonna move, that's the only thing I had in administration. In the Patrol Bureau, I want to look at the sworn personnel line. You're showing a reduction. Your proposal is a marked reduction from the FY25 adopted, from 6 million down to 4.7.
The entire override was deposited into that one account
Okay,
for 25.
okay.
So then when we move to 26, it's allocated correctly.
All right, so it's corrected. So the number that I should be comparing the 4.7 to is the 3.7 in FY23, which is a more accurate. And then the increase is due to various reasons. Is similar on the overtime in Patrol Bureau. You're at 1,253,000. Your actual in FY '23 was 1,448,000, and your actual in 2024 was 1.2. I appreciate that you're no longer adopting a low number and then playing up to it. I think this is more actual, and this is what Mike talked about all through his budget prep. Is this going to be, this is going to get you close to where you need to be?
Yeah, we're hoping it's going to put us right where we need to be, exactly.
Okay. All right. My only concern is your personnel is higher in FY '26 than it has been in previous years. So correct me if I'm wrong. So I don't know if the 1.2 versus the 1.4 or 1.44 that you had in FY '23, that concerns me. Is 1.253 going to do it?
By personnel being higher, do you mean the head count?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think the goal of the higher head count is to help reduce the overtime.
Okay, so you're anticipating that, but still you're incorporating increases over the last 2 years into that 1.2. So, it's tough to really, because there's so many anomalies that you get personnel-wise in determining overtime. It's tough to figure out exactly what the impact of the additional personnel is going to be, because you have the unforeseen retirements or injuries or whatnot. So I get it. I really appreciate the effort to be realistic in the number in comparison to the 449, knowing that you're going to have to come back. I really appreciate that. I just want to get some clarity on how close you think you're going to come, and I'm happy that you're optimistic on it.
Sir,
If I may, Counselor.
Sure, yeah.
So if you see an increase in headcount for a patrol program, for example, the numbers we're showing for headcount are FTEs. So it's not that on day one of fiscal '26 we're going to have that number headcount. That headcount could get to that number halfway through the fiscal year.
Right.
And they're budgeted appropriately. They're prorated throughout the year.
Yeah, so you're rolling them in. So you're not budget. You're using the trick that I always use, where you're going to have 5 new FTEs, but you're going to onboard them at various times. So you're not budgeting for 5. You're budgeting for maybe 2.5 or 3, because you're going to roll them in during the course of the fiscal year.
Right.
Okay.
And then in terms of how close we think we'll get, as you know, it's art, not a science. It's impossible to completely predict overtime. There's so many factors, as you alluded to. Over the past couple of years, though, I think we've done a pretty good job. My rolling projections, each payroll, by the time each fiscal year ends, I'm usually within 1% of where I forecasted. So this was our best estimate as to next year, knowing what we know now. But as we saw from Friday to yesterday, things change instantly. So
I get it.
As of today, it's still our best estimate.
I get it, but yeah, no, I appreciate it. I can tell how much effort went into this, because you're trying to be real on this, and your ability to strategically forecast is obviously limited by the unknown, but you're doing it, and I really appreciate the effort that went in.
Thank you.
Can you explain to me what the new number in machinery and equipment is?
hold on.
That's a newly created account for this upcoming fiscal year. So some of the items that we had paid for out of other accounts have now been moved over there, including our TASER program.
Okay, that makes sense.
It used to be in administration and is now moved to patrol, which seemed more appropriate.
No, it's fine. You could justify it in either place, but that's fine. I just wanted to know,
Sure.
why it was moving where it was moving. Field training officers, where are they incorporated in this budget? Because you've got a 0 in the line.
So the field training officers account, it's been showing on the budget for a number of years, but we haven't actually funded it in a number of years because of the way field training officers are compensated. So they're compensated based on how many shifts they work with a trainee. And it's just a small amount of overtime that, because of Munis and the way the payroll works, it just goes into the overtime account. They don't earn like a separate stipend or anything as field training officers. I think that account was originally created years ago, long before I was involved, when maybe the contracts did call for a stipend. But it's been dormant for several years.
So is it rolled into like a superior officer type role, or it could be in the patrol bureau as well?
Yes.
And you're assigning that duty specifically, correct? Because it's really important.
It's super important. It's the first line of supervision that that's what we preach to it. We want our best and brightest teaching our new best and brightest. So they're usually handpicked, and we send them off to a school, and their compensation, I think they get an hour for every day that they spend with a recruit, and part of that is to go over the book they have to complete, the field training manual they have to complete at the end of their shift. And sometimes it's time owed, and sometimes it's money, but it's tough to forecast that because we don't know the number of student officers we're going to have. But yeah, it's super important. We're constantly trying. People generally promote or go to different assignments. If somebody winds up in detectives, they're not going to be field training a patrol officer until they maybe do a little stint in detectives or something like that. So we're constantly training new folks.
I think it's essential to the creation of a positive culture in the department. I
Agreed.
think that's really as important as the command structure.
100%.
And as important as any handbook or policy that you have. It's what the people that are teaching the new onboards, what's expected, and creating the expectations and so forth. I think, that's important. So I'm glad you clarified that function is being performed. It's not zeroed out. It's just, it's a, archaic term in your budget, so that's fine. Again, I want to thank you for the amount of detail, the variety of ways in which you're describing the functions of the department, and all of you for your work throughout the year on behalf of the residents of Braintree. I think, I really appreciate all of your work. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you, Counselor Moran, and thank you all for being here. I just have a few follow-up questions that I don't think have been touched on yet. Can you help me understand again the head count? So we have 75 active people today,
Working bodies.
officers today.
Maybe
Can
I
you, can you please?
So we are budgeted for 89. We are budgeted for 89.
Oh, we're
right?
budgeted for 89.
Right now, under our employee, we have 82. Okay?
Okay.
5 of those 82 are in the police academy. So they're not on the street. They're not a working body to us.
5. So 89 minus 82 is 7. So you had 7 retirements, resignations,
All kinds
unfilled
of-
positions.
All kinds of stuff throughout the year.
Okay.
We've been able to backfill some. We lost 11 in FY25. So that 7 is the delta between, the 4 we've onboarded to fill those jobs
Okay.
and what we're trying to accomplish now. So when I say working bodies, I mean working the street today, 75. Because we have 2 long-term injuries that are out, they're not working. And 5 in the academy. So you go from
Okay.
82 to 75.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
I'm sorry
Thank
if I
you
was
for.
not clear on that.
No. It was. I just was trying to keep track of everything. Okay. So then, when I look at your target for FY26, it's for 95.
So what that represents is we had a 5-year plan of hitting 102 officers that I would love to see happen. Right now, that we kept that number in there as a goal, just to see where we should be if we were extrapolating out those additions to sworn personnel over 5 years. We even adjusted away a year. So I think I started that in 23, but now we're looking at like 29. But anyway, that's where we would like to be. I'll be happy if we get to 89, because right now we have 2 that have signaled retirement, but we don't know when. we will have 10 vacancies to fill. Probably at least 10 vacancies to fill. 9, probably 9 with those two, because you got the 7, I'm gonna confuse myself.
Oh my God.
7, right? And then if we have 2 go, that's not including like what we don't know is gonna happen. So that would get us to 89. If we had 9 bodies, if we hired 9 over the year and all else remains the same, with those 2 that are gonna leave, probably. That would get us to 89. To now hire another 5 or 6 or 7 to get us where I think we need to be is gonna be a Herculean effort based on the job market and based on the money, and we're also, we're budgeted for 89.
Okay, that was going to be my next question. So if we're budgeted for 89, it doesn't seem like we're going to be able to get more than 89.
We've committed to 89. We're
Okay.
committed to doing to completing our mission with the approved budget.
So I think just, and I have, I guess, a follow-on sort of, or corollary to that in with the goals. My concern is that what we have for like our aspirations, we have written down as goals that are not really attainable. Because it doesn't sound like goal number 2 is going to be attainable in 26.
Are you talking, is that the head count?
That's the body cameras. Because that is reliant on, it sounds like, grant funding that may or may not be available.
It's not necessarily relying on grant funding that may or may not be available. It's relying, I mean, that would obviously be, give us some challenge if we weren't able to get grants. But it's also some labor issues that we have to get through. We're going into bargaining right now. This is gonna be on the table. We're hoping to come up with some kind of agreement, even a triggering clause maybe. I don't know. I don't know how that's gonna shake out. We have to get by that, and then we gotta figure out how to pay for it. You're right. I mean, the grants, obviously, we're hoping they're gonna be available. If they are not, it's gonna be more money. But I look at it as, these are aggressive goals, and, particularly, and even relating back to the head count. That was a strategy that we talked about with municipal finance, because we pretty much knew we were gonna be at 89, because there was a little bit of trepidation about the coming year, right? And making sure that the town was stable enough to support our hiring and support all of our asks. So it was a little bit of a strategy, but if you don't ask, you'll never get it. So we didn't incorporate it into the budget itself, but it would still be where I see this department in 5 years, that's where we would be. And these goals were articulated in October 30th.
No, I understand. It's not a knock on our aspirations
Yeah, yeah.
and where we want to be or the strategy or anything else. It's making it clear for residents
Gotcha.
that when I look at this, and I know this is the first year that this format has been deployed, so it's a learning curve for all of us, but it seems like then the expectation is we want to get as close as possible to the target, when in fact we're not budgeted for that. So I think it's just a little bit of semantics and a little bit of clarification and clarity, because we go back to refer to this book throughout the year. If there's things in here that are not realistic goals, to me, if it's a goal, it has to at least have the possibility of being attainable. And we don't have funding. We don't have any designated funding for
Sure.
7 more people and the body cameras. So that's all. It's a commentary. You can take it or leave it.
If I may.
yes.
The biggest challenge for municipal policing across the state is being able to keep your numbers up because of the way the retirement system works. So if you have 32 years of service and you're 55 years of age, you're at maximum retirement. But you don't have to go for 10 years, and you don't have to tell anybody. So any day out of those 10 years, they could walk into my office, like happened on Monday, and leave. So it's very difficult to municipally plan for that when you have an 18-month ramp up. So we've been exploring all kinds of options with the mayor's office, with municipal finance, on what we can do in coming years to maybe have even a range. But again, this wasn't the year to do that. But we wanted to articulate where where I think we need to be, and my administration thinks we need to be, knowing that, number one, it would be very difficult to get there because of the funding, you're right. And two, the job market is brutal right now. We're having trouble attracting candidates.
Counselor Maglio? Thank you, Chief.
Sure.
Thank you. Just to jump in there, I hear what both of you are saying, and I wonder if maybe just the measurement needs to change. And it's what gets articulated is, step one is getting through the labor phase of this, and step two, which could take 18 months instead of 12, would be getting identifying the funding source, so that instead of all sworn personnel equipped with body cams 100% by a year from now, essentially, you've broken down those steps somewhat so that you can actually accomplish these goals, because I understand that then you're going to have to answer to, well, why is it only 20%, or why haven't you gotten the funding, or why hasn't there been a labor agreement, and because we will be asking those things.
Fair enough. That's your job.
Yeah, but it just seems like it all makes sense, and it's aspirational, and it's like launch year one or phase one of the 5-year plan, which started in 2024 or whatever. So, okay, just wanted to throw that in. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Maglio. Okay, I don't have any other particular questions at this point. Counselor Flaherty?
Thanks. I forgot to ask about the BRECC, which that's dispatch, right?
Correct.
And the last I heard on this issue, we had a regionalized grant with, was it just Randolph, or was it Randolph and other communities?
Just Randolph.
Just Randolph, to combine our dispatch, and then I think we were going to place that to JFK. But now I think the location, it sounds like the location is not finalized. And do we still have the regionalized grant? Are we still thinking a regionalized approach to this, or has that fundamentally shifted as well?
Nope, we still have the grant, and we're still pushing forward with the project.
Okay. And how long does the grant enable us to, consider these issues?
So the grant you have to apply for every year.
Okay.
And they fund based on what they perceive to be completed that year. So it comes in segments, but they're committed to it. We had a long meeting with State 911 over that very issue, and they were very open. They want to see it succeed. So they are on board, and the project continues.
Okay. Excellent. Glad to know that the grant funding is still with us. That's fabulous. That's all I have.
Okay.
Thank you. Yep, back to Counselor Maglio.
Thank you. To piggyback on that, can you share very briefly, I know that a lot probably went into this, but could you share just like a minute's worth of insight into why that location was chosen in the first place, and then why it's not feasible anymore?
So the location was chosen, predates me a little bit. I was in operations at the time. That was an administrative function. It was under Chief Du Bois. It was chosen for a number of reasons why we didn't continue that. I think there was some historical value to the building there was some concerns. There were some parking issues that were some concerns. That's as best as it was articulated to me.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else, Counselor Moran? Okay. Anything else for the police department? Yes, our town auditor. I should have acknowledged you earlier. I'm sorry, Sean McGoldrick from CLA is here. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Hopefully 2 quick questions. I know that the fiscal year 26 budget does not contain CBA increases as you guys are going through the process. If and when there's a COLA adjustment, is it currently funded in a salary reserve in the budget currently for fiscal year 26?
That's correct, Sean. I'm sorry. So within the finance department, is
If you wouldn't mind moving that mic a little bit closer to you.
Oh, sorry, Mike.
sorry about that. So within the finance department, there is a reserve for, let's call them townside, collective bargaining employments across all the various departments equal to 2% currently. That's the amount that the mayor articulated when she filed the budget.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And then last but not least, the line that shows up in, I think, all divisions, the education incentive, how does that work? Is it based on base pay? Is there a percentage based on the CBA? Just a brief explanation on that. Thank you.
You want to take it? Sure. Fine.
It's mirrored after an old Massachusetts statute and benefit called the Quinn Bill. So depending on the degree that a particular officer has, whether that's an associate's, a bachelor's, or a master's, it's either 10, 20, or 25% of base pay. And certain degrees from accredited colleges are recognized based on the collective bargaining agreements. So that amount changes every year, obviously based on headcount, assignment, and what degrees the officers earn throughout the year to apply to the next fiscal year.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So I know we have Councillor Quilty here in the room. Unfortunately, you have to email your questions in if you have them. I'm so sorry. That's just like a parliamentary procedural thing. But I do want to say thank you, District 4 Councillor, for joining us this evening. So with that, anyone else on the committee with questions for the chief? Okay. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it, and please pass our gratitude on to your entire team.
Will do. Thank you all very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you. Have a good night.
Nobody puts Mike in the corner. Thank you all.
Yeah, get some freedom over there. How are you? Counselor? Oh, yeah. Do they have those?
I don't know that they got a copy yet.
No. Yep. Yeah, that'd be great. So they don't vote tonight?
Go for it.
Thank you.
On the sub. If they approve the sub.
They got this though. They got this.
Yeah.
She had it.
Do you have a copy? I just gave them both. Yep.
I'm good. I'm good.
Okay. Thank you so much. We're now moving on to our fire department. We have Chief Viola here and our fire, tell me your title again, Hillary, please. Fire coordinator. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for being here and for providing us with this supplemental information. So Chief, if you want to kick us off with any preamble, as I said to the
Sure, yeah.
police chief, go right ahead.
First of all, thank you all. Thanks for your patience and your understanding over the last year or so. Hopefully tonight I'll be able to clarify any of your questions and be as transparent as we can with any of the issues that you may or may not have. This has been quite the year. I think it's pretty well known now among Ways and Means and the council. We did not receive override funding. So in the very beginning, we negotiated with Local 920 to drop our manning for 1 year and to really just sort of buckle down and make it through this fiscal year. And I'm proud to say that we it looks as though now we will be able to do that. That being said, our budget is, we're proud of it. We're hopeful that this will be the budget, and we'll get through without a sub. And yeah, just as we roll along, we make some changes and a lot of things, which if I'm more than happy to answer for you in processes and personnel, and we've done a lot of things to really shape it up. So, and I'm very proud of that. So with that, I can give you a brief overview of where we are now. So the programs within the budget have been corrected to show accurate numbers, accurate projections for this fiscal year of '26. We're in review of new software systems to ensure accurate tracking and revenue generation. We've talked to a number of companies, but we want to make sure we're making the right choices with that. We continue to remain over 90% collected on any of our outside paid details. We brought a process in right away. Yes, over 90. We brought a process in right away. Very simple process at first, and then when Hillary joined, she maintains that process, and now we have a very accurate tracking system and a collection system that really works for us. So any of those ones that are outstanding are really just within that 30-day pay period. Additionally, going before my appointment, Hillary has been dogged in chasing down some of the outstanding things as well, up to and about $70,000 worth. So that's a credit to her and her abilities to get things rolling and get people paying us. We are working now to get an online payment platform, again, because it will help us with like physically taking in checks and bringing to the bank. So the FY25 supplemental budget, as drastic as it was for all of us to accept and to work through, it really helped us in building FY26's budget. And by that I mean we corrected a lot of issues that in payroll and in all the other segments of the contract programs, which we can talk about individually tonight if you'd like, and got them to where the real numbers were, made people whole, got them to where they're supposed to be, and that's how we based our 26 budget on those numbers. We hired 4 lateral firefighters to augment staffing or to get staffing up and to slow the bleeding a little with the overtime. We were, at one point, we were 10 people short. Plus injury, plus sick, as Council Moore mentioned earlier. It's hard to budget for that, but we had that as well. So we implemented four new laterals from various communities that joined us. Not only was I impressed with the people, I was impressed with their skill set. Hazardous material tech, 2 paramedics, 2 EMTs. So I really, you know, I'm excited for them to join us, and they're excited to be part of us. So. And that's huge because they fill those vacancies and try to slow that bleeding a little with the overtime expenditures. We continue to fill those vacancies that I mentioned with now having an established list from a test that was given in February, interview process, and we've recently selected 6 candidates that are going through the process now to hopefully get into an academy very soon. And that will, again, bring that staffing level up to the 88 and hopefully maintain and control the overtime and the expenditures on, because if the manning goes back to 17, which it will, because the agreement with Local 920 ends, we needed those bodies in place to make that possible. So with that, I think that's all I have for you, unless you have some questions for me.
Thank you so much, Chief. And I want to acknowledge the work you've done over the course of the year. I think back to a year ago, and think we were all kind of shell-shocked with where we started. So incredibly commendable work on your part and Hillary. And I also want to acknowledge Local 920 for working collaboratively with the community, essentially, to make sure that everybody was safe. And we had unexpected fires throughout the year, brush fires. I don't think anybody plans for that. So please pass on our gratitude to your entire staff.
I will. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the help I got from municipal finance, HR, Treasury, the mayor's office as well, because it was truly a team effort. It was refreshing to see that and actually feel the outcome of that. So with that.
That's great to hear. Thank you for that. Councilor Magley, did you want to start us off again?
Thank you. So I don't have a lot of detailed questions because we've had so many meetings with you. You've given so much information. And what I wanted to say, and it dovetails with what Councilor Barrica was saying, is that you and Hillary and your team are literally and figuratively like each of you, like a phoenix rising from the ashes, because you stepped in.
Yeah, that was good.
Right? You stepped into a smoldering, difficult situation. And there were, talk about a 5-alarm fire. This was it. And where we are now makes me, you should almost do a case study of what has happened and the trajectory that the department has gone through. And even what you mentioned about working as a team, that's exactly the way it's supposed to be, is that each different department has a specialty and an expertise and a willingness to support and share information and work together. And at the end of the day, everybody goes off and does their thing, but we have to be able to work collaboratively, and that's exactly what you all are doing. So I want to also give my great thanks and commend both of you and the rest of the department. And then my only brief question is around your agreement with the local and what it looks like to have that change now.
As far as the future in July 1?
Yep, staffing and minimum.
They'll go from the 16-person minimum to 17-person, which is standard. That's the contract language. That agreement will end. And then what we'll do now is hopefully we'll have the staffing increase. I'm looking to get people into a July academy if I can possibly do it. It's all hanging on physicals being done and PATs being done. If I can do that, we'll be in really good shape. The academy's 10 weeks, so it would start in July and would get, to Labor Day basically-ish, and then be able to put them right into the staffing again to kind of even that out and stop that overtime expenditure. If not, it would be September before I can get them into an academy. Those are heavy months, July, August. We've learned that from last year. So there would be a spike in those few months right there. But then once we get the staffing back, that's when it would even out again.
Excellent. I'm going to stop there for other questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening. Good to see you both again. So good work in the years that has transpired. To the comments of Councilor Maglio, I would wholeheartedly agree. You have picked up that mantle, and you have risen your fire department to new heights, I think, from the past. So I want to talk a little bit about your, so let's, the nice easy one here. The first one is the department head that's reflected here. Is this you or the Chief O'Brien?
No, that's Chief O'Brien currently.
That's Chief O'Brien's salary, so he's still being paid through the operating budget?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What was, I guess this is just a question for later, maybe Mike, Director Esmond can give me some information back. I'm just curious about that spike in FY24 for the fire chief's pay that went up to $218,000. And then why are we down to, back down to the 186 over the last 3 years?
Oh, yes. You need the mic.
So I think the answer is that in fiscal -- we paid, at the time, we were paying essentially for the overlapping costs for a couple months. When I'm trying to forget the date, Chief, I want to say May 6th or something like that you were appointed, yeah. So that we didn't continue that in only a very brief portion, or maybe we reversed all of it. So thanks, Hillary. So in fiscal '25, we changed that to have the chief paid fully out of program Chief Viola paid out of Program 4,
Yeah.
while Chief O'Brien is paid out of Program 1. Sorry, I am mumbling through this.
First, they put me in the same.
Together, two,
Program. and
right.
We took us out because we were gonna run out of money. So we
Got it.
Flexed it and moved it back.
That's very helpful.
The other piece of this, Counselor, that I want to also add in, I can get additional information is, we may have had some pieces of the contract that Chief O'Brien signed might not have been paid out till later in the year, in fiscal '24, and so there may be portions of like one-time payments as well that are in that. But we can get the.
Yeah,
facts
it's
of
something
that.
we could follow up on, I guess.
Yeah.
That'd be great. We don't need to cover that this evening, but the question's been asked, and I do appreciate you looking into it for us. And the brief explanation we got, it makes it makes things a little bit more making sense to me here, but the details are always good to know. Okay, so moving then along down to fire equipment and maintenance, I do see that that you have an increase overall in your equipment maintenance of 36%. And the reason I'm asking, I'm going down this path here is, you just mentioned previously, a few minutes ago, Chief, that you had to, I guess, take a vehicle offline, didn't you? Didn't you have to take an engine or something offline during last year's budget?
Yeah, many. We had a lot of mechanical issues that were, it's difficult.
I'm
to-
sorry, Chief, I meant as part of the cuts, or the
Oh,
part
yeah,
of.
I'm sorry, yeah,
You,
we took the,
as operational decision, not necessarily a maintenance issue,
Oh,
but
sorry.
operationally, you did have to take a vehicle offline?
Yes, we took Tower One out of service.
That was it.
Based on staffing.
Great. So the numbers that we're seeing now, are they reflective of how many vehicles in the upcoming fiscal year versus what you've been operating in the current fiscal year?
Well, we have 4 engines, 1 ladder.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll have 4 engines, 2 ladders now. Tower One will be
Excellent.
back in service.
Okay, great. That's another good story, as you said, and that falls in line with your assessment that what you went through last year budgetarily has helped you position yourself better as a department in this fiscal year.
I believe so, yes.
Okay, and there's some proof in the pudding there, I guess. Where are you finding, what is the overall age of, would you say on average, of your vehicle fleet?
The newest we have is a 2021.
Mhm.
Then it goes to 17, then it goes to 12, then it goes to 02.
Okay, and they're all still within an, I'm not gonna say optimal, but efficient level of serviceability?
Part of the program, for me anyway, moving forward, is to have a preventive maintenance program and a certification program built into the budget, so that we can make sure that they are maintained to the point where they are tested, and they're operable. Right now, that was not, it hasn't been done in a number of years, so we're trying to get that to that point right now.
So this preventive maintenance program is going to build in some savings for you, is, by the essence of preventive maintenance,
So we're
right?
hoping.
It's very valuable having experiences in that area for a number of years. And is it going to be at the operator level? You're not going to be bringing in additional personnel to
No,
do
we
that
have,
maintenance?
We have 2 companies that we work with that do our maintenance. We don't have a mechanic.
You don't have a
Staff.
mechanic, but is there, in a preventive maintenance program, one of the things that from a foundation standpoint, is the operator of the vehicle itself.
Mhm.
The operators perform kind of, and I'm sure this is part of your daily
Circle
routine.
checks, testing.
You
working.
got it.
Yeah.
That's
done daily. but-
That's done daily. Okay, so when we talk about this more formal preventive maintenance program, it's outside and above and beyond the operators of the vehicles.
At least twice a year, going through the truck, or the car, or whatever vehicle it is, and going from bumper to bumper to make sure that all the big stuff is okay, and then fixing the little stuff.
Great, okay. Well, that's good to hear. You did kind of, looks like there's a number or a couple of different maintenance categories by program, correct?
Yeah.
And it looks like some of them are down a little, which like, say, the fire equipment maintenance, 22003. You're down from 95 last year to 75,000 this year. Are you picking it up in another area that I haven't quite identified in the?
We've moved moved some stuff around, so it's a good catch. Like you notice, the tires have increased. And that's because of the need for certain tires, whereas parts, we didn't expend as much as we thought during this year.
Okay.
So parts are, not only are they expensive and unavailable half the time, they're just, they're becoming more and more unreliable. So,
Okay.
but we, working with these two vendors, that we're getting on top of that and replacing and putting new stuff in, which will last.
So this is another benefit from the preventive maintenance
Yes.
program
So
engagement?
we have to keep, these things, we gotta keep them moving, because, as we'll talk about, I'm sure, as we move forward, in purchasing new ones, they're 2 to 3 years away. I can't just go down to the lot and grab one. In fact, we're borrowing one now from, another community while the other ones are being serviced.
I see, okay. Does that involve any kind of an additional cost when you borrow from another?
No,
No.
it's sort of like mutual aid.
Got it.
It's a relationship between chiefs that we talk, and all of us have the same needs. So we'll say, hey, who has a truck that I can use for a couple of days while I get mine fixed, and that's really what we do.
Okay, so my last question, and I'll pass this off, it's operationally speaking, and then of course, the costs that would be associated. Your mission, or the types of missions and responses that you have. In particular, previous speaker referenced some of the fires in our woods, wildfires that are going on in our area. You had a lot of time last year that you spent, your team, your department spent fighting fires in the Blue Hills, in grass areas, and that had to be monitored, up behind Skyline Apartments, up in those areas like that. Do you find yourself looking down the road of having more resources available for that type of situations occurring more often?
We had a forestry truck that was out of service. So that is currently being revitalized, and so that we'll have at least that smaller capability pickup type truck.
I recall that was bought about 6-7 years ago, maybe?
Yeah, you might be thinking of the squad truck. This is a different,
I thought it was a brush fire truck.
either one.
Right,
It's,
okay.
The squad truck is a brush truck, or it can be a brush truck, but it's not designed to do what
Gotcha.
we did last fall.
Okay.
We do have a pickup truck that has a skid in the back with water and forestry and a small pump that we could get into these tighter spots with, and that's being repaired now. I was hoping it was gonna be done by now, because May is wildfire month for the
Yeah.
FPA.
Yeah.
Hopefully, it doesn't, but.
Right,
But
right.
I wanted to be prepared this year, so that and we do have resources that we can call out, and mutual aid agreements and task force and things like that, but as far as for the town of Braintree, we should have our own asset too, that could at least start this and get out deeper into the woods.
Right, so it does, I guess, my question to begin with, and your answer is, yes, you are looking at
I am, yes.
allocating more in that area of firefighting.
Yes.
Got it. Okay, thank you. That's all I have for right now, Madam Chair.
So I will just say that I think this budget is very much more clear than I have seen from this department in the past, and I just, again, will echo my colleagues' gratitude and admiration for a really clear, concise document. Also, my other colleagues have really you've answered most of my questions, but I have just a couple of outstanding ones, and one is to follow up on this question of the fires.
Yes.
I think that there is, a probability that we'll see more of those, and in addition to the kinds of equipment that we may need to combat those, have you factored in that likelihood into the calculation for overtime?
To an extent, yes, but not to an extreme, if that makes any sense to you. I don't anticipate them. Hopefully, we do have following up with some people about going out into those areas and getting, we have to do some clearing, we have to do some police patrols, we have to do some things behind Skyline in particular that, you know, those fires were started by something that is pretty preventable for the most part. So I'm trying to be as nice as I can, but we just have to, I didn't anticipate them to be an extreme problem, but I did anticipate them in the overtime account.
Okay, so we're focusing on prevention, and
Yes.
there's anticipation that that can make a really big difference. That is great news, because those were astonishing in how fast they spread and how much attention they took. The other thing that I'll ask is, in the trends and metrics, which is on page 133 of the budget book, we have a really clear kind of line about the number of calls per 24 hours.
Yes.
But then we have this like staggering drop in the number of overdoses that we've seen so far in 2025. And I just was wondering if you would elaborate on that.
Sure, that's a snapshot of those few months that we were in. I think there's probably 2 or 3 factors from that. One is Narcan or naloxone, the drug that reverses that, is readily available now in CVS and everywhere else. And I do believe that when they go, if someone's going to a clinic or someone has an addiction issue, they actually have Narcan with them. So they may be giving that and not calling 911 and not deploying it. Which would be an indication of, you know, of why the drop. It's gone up a little bit more than that, but on average it stays right around the same. It used to be, you know, very high, very much higher than that. It was like 1 a day for us at one point a few years ago. And that, when I'm on the partnership committee, and it's really great the work that they're doing, but then even some of the other help, some of the other people who help, like Manit and some of the other agencies, the police with their CIT and their family services unit, they're getting out there and preventing a lot of it, which is a good thing.
All right.
But that's why the spike. And it was only, that was a snapshot from July to October, I think it was, or when we started this. Right in there somewhere. So I could have updated it, but I didn't. I just, that was one of it was like a 4 or 5 month snapshot, basically.
Okay, well, I certainly hope that they stay down. Those are my questions for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor.
Chief, good evening. I always try to keep up with Councilor Maglio, so I'm going to talk, rather than a phoenix, it was a baptism by fire. So,
Thank you.
so anyway, you inherited a very difficult situation with limited resources with which to address them. You handled it very professionally. You showed an ability to collaborate with the collective bargaining group, which should not be undervalued or underestimated. That's hard, and that shows the level of respect and trust that they put in you to provide leadership. You've also attracted 4 lateral transfers, and that's so unusual in fire. To get 1 is rare. To get 2 paramedics where we don't do ambulance is very unusual. So it demonstrates again that your department is a good place to work, where I think people feel like they can work in a positive environment and their work's appreciated and valued, and shows the reputation of the department is strong. Hillary, I want to thank you for being a sea change in your role. The professionalism, the persistence with which you've been addressing a pretty bad situation and cleaning up. I know we all in the Ways and Means really appreciate your work, and thank you for that. If people just look at the numbers in the budget book, they're going to think we're just cranking money in. But what this really is an appropriate services budget, because the prior year we were gearing up for if the override didn't pass. And you didn't receive any money in the override. You made adjustments internally to handle, those budget restrictions. And it puts strain on your department, but you worked through it. And that's a credit to the union, to all the personnel, and to the supervisory staff as well. So I give you credit. My only question is going to be probably towards Mike. When are we going to get to a resolution on the former chief's contract? Are we closer to that than we were a year ago at this time? Because it seems like this is extended pretty long. And we're going to need the mic.
Oh, Mike needs the mic.
So, Council, I understand that question, and please correct me if I'm wrong. Specifically to when will there only be one chief?
Yeah.
So I'm probably not the best to answer that. I have a general understanding that we are in that the chief has signaled his intention to retire.
Okay.
I don't know that there's an official date, but I think that the process has moved along, and that might be the best I could say. The budget does only reflect one chief, Chief Viola, and this is, the assumption here is that on June 30th, that we'll have the current chief, Chief O'Brien, will have retired. We wouldn't have done that if we didn't have some reasonable expectation that it would be by the close of the fiscal year.
Okay. I just wanted to get some clarity on that. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Moran, and thank you again for making this really very easy to understand and to see where all the variances are. So I'm going to go on a little bit of a different tack, and I'm hoping you can help me understand the role of BEMA, which I believe had been funded from the Pilgrim Nuclear Power Plant, and I believe that funding is gone now. So can you help me understand, where, I think that's having an emergency management director is a statutory requirement, if I'm not well, maybe someone can correct me, but can you help me understand what's going on with BEMA? Where is the funding coming from? How is it being staffed for the upcoming fiscal year?
Take that, and I can elaborate.
Just whoever does it needs the mic.
He can do the funding, and then I'll tell you what.
Thank you. Okay.
So, Madam Chair, as we've discussed in some other meetings, we don't file, the current iterations of our budgets do not file non-budgetary trusts and grants and things like that, although that is a further enhancement down the road we'd like to look at. But you're right, there is a trust that's largely funded the operations of BEMA, which hasn't had new revenue coming in for several years. It's titled the Boston Edison Trust, which is sort of an awkward, I suppose, since it's really paying for Braintree Emergency Management. We're currently projecting, based on the expense patterns and the fact that there is a part-time salary paid out of that and some other utility and equipment costs, that we'll close the year with roughly $16,000. That's subject to, obviously how we close the year. I feel fairly confident. I worked with Rob to sort of approximate those expenses, but that right now has not really fallen under the really responsibility of it hasn't under the fire department. The police department currently is the sort of primary town department that oversees the day-to-day sort of financial management. This proposal would move that responsibility under the fire department. In the budget this year, for the first time, we are allocating general fund dollars under the new program 10, and the budget that was that's reflected under 10. So that's on page 15, running into 16.
That's at the 35,620.
Correct. Thank you. So these are somewhat best guesses of what the budget will be in combination with the 16,000. I think what we'll be doing in the ensuing months, working with the chief, Hillary, Rob, is to really try to get a good sense of what that first year bridge is. I think it should be characterized as a bridge. I don't know that we anticipate it to be substantially more than the 50 plus that that's in the budget, essentially next year with the two funding sources. A lot of the manpower is voluntary, and it's a coordination function. But, you know, we wanted to make sure that we transparently showed to the committee, to the residents, that this funding has gone away, and this is a function that the mayor feels is critical to have performed in some way, and there are some costs that need to be funded. And to have the fire department essentially absorb it within its existing funding was not realistic either. So we did find a way to allocate some of these funding, and I think what we'll need to do is sort of work with the department to report back, work with the chief on how he intends to sort of coordinate now this function under the fire department. So I think the numbers that are in front of you, I can give you the basis of them and how we arrived at them, but they are sort of best fit bridge numbers until we have more clarity.
So the 35,620 that's budgeted, and then you're adding the 16,000 that's left in the grant
Correct.
fund. Okay, so that's getting you to your 50,000. And are we anticipating still having that part-time staff?
Correct.
Okay,
The
through.
extent of which that role will be, that's something that the chief is, you know, going to determine, you know, sort of in his, you know, at his discretion as he begins to take that on. So no changes as of now through the fiscal year's conclusion. But yes, that part-time would be there, and part-time role. And we would expect, we've listed here a stipend. We also do anticipate there may be some leadership adjustments as far as financial goes, because this will be something that to integrate it into the fire department control and management and leadership would probably potentially require that.
Can you talk a little bit about what you mean when you say a bridge?
Well,
Or,
it's really-
or maybe the chief can,
I guess what I would just say is that, you know, in '26, how the funding that is currently available to the BEMA team is deployed won't be in '27, let's say. So in '26, we sort of have reflected the budget to some degree, that the way that the expense levels that are in '25 and prior years. But I think once we have a sense of what's the best use, even some of the space uses and equipment that the BEMA team has, I think after a year, I guess I don't want to speak for the chief, but I don't know that we would expect that we would have the budget that's available allocated in this way, and that it will actually necessarily have to be 53,000 or 52,000 next year. So this year, I think, is going to be somewhat of that discovery, I guess.
It's like a learning year to see where we're really
Correct.
netting out with the financial needs for BEMA.
Yes.
Okay, and that's Braintree Emergency Management Association? Okay, just for anyone who's watching. Agency, thank you.
But yeah,
Chief, did you have anything you wanted to
Yeah,
add?
just the idea behind it is to revamp it. I think a lot of people expect one thing, and it's really not that. So I think under this leadership and under the leadership of the fire department, it is what we do. We're incident managers, right? So
Yep.
as we move forward, I just want to see what kind of assets we have, what kind of personnel, and grow that. I actually got I should say an intern. I was going to say a kid. He's a kid, but intern from Mass Maritime coming in
great.
after June 4th, who is studying emergency management to come into the fire department and work with me to evaluate some of our plans and do some of the things that we should be doing. And with Rob's help, we'll get through this and get a good indication of over this year what we're going to do moving forward.
Excellent, well, that's great, and I'm always happy to hear we're getting college interns to help too.
Yeah.
That's a great way to build the bench.
Great kid.
Hopefully he or she will stay. All right, Mr. McGoldrick, do you have any questions for fire? Okay. Any other questions on the budget? We do have another fire item on tonight's agenda. Okay. Do I close this out? Wait till the end. Okay. All right. So we are now going to move on to 25006, Mayor Supplemental Appropriation Number 2, or take up any action relative thereto. I know we did get a late-breaking memo from the mayor today. Director Esmond, did you want to speak on this, or the chief?
On that memo, Madam Chair, or the
Any of it.
refiled motion? There were a couple things, I think,
Yeah,
that came over
and
the trends.
truthfully, I don't even know what time it came across the email, so I think if we can get an overview, that would be helpful on both.
Sure. So
Thank you.
today we sent over a refiled motion number 1. Originally, we filed, motion number 1 would have been at a level of 895,000 transferred from 2024 certified free cash to the fire details fund. Based on the feedbacks and the input we've received from the committee, what we have refiled, that number is now at 300,000, which is equal to the sum of the negotiated, essentially based on the negotiations we've had with Clean Harbor, where if you'll recall, there was roughly $542,000 of disputed invoices with them. They agreed from negotiations to pay 242, leaving a balance of 300,000, which the town would essentially need to fund. So what this motion would do would be to solely fund, using fiscal year 2024 certified free cash, that amount. The balance of that original filing is, let's call it roundly 600,000. It's a little bit less than that. Was the projected remaining details fund deficit. That is made up of invoices that had not been paid, essentially a fund deficit for multiple fiscal years. If you remember in the discussion, it went back to, I think, fiscal 19. And there was a lot of unclarity in detail. I would just like to echo the chief's comments. Hillary Lawless has been doing an exceptional job. I thank her very much, because it's very difficult for us to recover some of these as the shelf life grows on, as the time of these invoices age. And also some of the data we have going further back, we have some challenges. What we'll do is continue to pursue and report back to the committee on the success that the team has had. I think it's great that since July 1st, 2024, so fiscal 25, when this team has taken over, we have seen a much greater collections rate, and further, just a much greater attention and level of concern. So that is good. I think it would be to just be clear to the committee is what will happen when we don't fund this balance is at the close of fiscal 25, we will have a fund deficiency, a deficit. We report one every year. Typically, there's offset by new revenues coming in the first quarter, I think. If I can say that right, Sean, I'm looking over, thank you. Depending on how much we're successfully able to recover, this will be somewhat diminished, hopefully well below the 600. I don't know about well below, but there will be some amount that I would anticipate that if we're not able to cure, we may be back in a subsequent fiscal year needing to fund it. And ultimately, I think we'll have to figure out at what's the right time to just say, some of this amount we just feel like is not recoverable. There are a number of leads, and I very much, again, just thank Hillary for her efforts to try to recover them to the greatest extent. So that is summarizing sort of the change in the refiled motion 1. All the other motions from SUP 2 were adopted, and thank you for your support. I know there subsequently also was a memo sent over from our town solicitor, Ken Rossetti. So I'm not sure that you would like me to address that also with this.
I think we can start with the supplemental, and then if anyone has questions on that, we can move on. Thank you for that explanation. I appreciate it. Councilor Moore, did you want to start us off?
Yes, I appreciate the mayor's reconsideration of the amount being asked in this fiscal year. I was concerned about the $895,000 being an inordinate drain on a finite resource for this fiscal year, and I wanted to limit it. And I appreciate her favorable response to my request, so I'm happy to make this motion.
Thank you, Councilor Moore, and thank you for your leadership on this issue among the committee. Other questions? Councilor Maglio. I'm
still a little confused. The some odd that we started off with, the 900,000, was that made up of both, or most significantly from the details at the plaza and at Clean Harbors that were unpaid? Or are we talking specifically the Clean Harbors deficit?
Of the 900,000, only about a third of that was Clean Harbors.
And so then so 2/3 of it was a variety of unpaid, as well as a significant portion of it was the plaza.
I would say the biggest bulk of it was uncollected, unpaid fees, unassociated with the plaza. The matter of the plaza was not that we actually hadn't had payment, it was that they were erroneously charged to the fund when they should, those details are not recovered via paid fees coming back from the plaza. They have a mitigation agreement with us. And some amount of that funding is is understood that we'll pay particularly during the holiday season for coverage for details. For several years, they were expensed to the fund. It hadn't been requested to be moved over to to essentially the general fund, which is what needs to happen. So there was some portion of that were erroneously funded, essentially erroneously billed, I should say. So we've corrected that problem in fiscal '25, and we will continue to make sure that we do it correctly going forward.
Okay, so then, big picture, we started at around 800,000, or 900,000. We are putting in a supplemental for 300. Clean Harbors paid two something, I believe. Right.
But that 240 is netted off. The 900,000 is after.
Oh, it's after.
Yeah.
So I am unclear as to where that other 500 is.
So
Part of it we've collected.
a large portion of it was growing, was just the balance of that fund growing. It grew substantially in fiscal '24 into '25 because of the Clean Harbors issue, because that's where there was a huge jump. If you remember last meeting, I said that listed the balances and they had grown substantially at the close of '24 from '23. But we had slowly been growing those unpaid those unpaid invoices, the balance of them, and that's what the bulk of them. Really unpaid invoices that we are, we believe we know who's listed as needs to pay us. We have some issues we have to track though, quite honestly, whether they paid us, whether in fact we've got that we are going through records that we have not created. So, I think you guys, they brought a specimen of some of the examples I think that were requested at the last meeting that they could walk you through, but they go back, I think, as far, I want to say, Hillary, to 2019. So there's a lot of work we'll have to do to figure out, what level of collection success we're going to likely have.
Okay, so let me ask this then. So basically there was just shy of $1 million, let's say. All right, or 900,000 of unpaid or unknown detail expenses. The town is actually having to eat a good portion of that, if not all of it.
Right. Well, the 300,000 that is funded in this motion, absolutely in that case, because we negotiated with them, the Clean Harbors folks contested every dollar of of the 542. So while yes, 300,000 is not an insignificant sum, it was negotiated based on from a position that they weren't going to pay any of it.
Yeah, it's amazing what has been done to chip away at this. But really, what I really want to get to, can I just jump in,
Yep.
Director Esmond? What I'm really stuck on is the fact that almost $1 million worth of expenses over the course of a couple of years can be outstanding, lost, missing, not collected, but in a drawer somewhere, whatever the situation is, and that the people accountable for that, first of all, one of them continues to be paid, and that there is no actual accountability or acknowledgement. And I know that this has come up in other meetings where we've hinted around at, is this actionable? Is there legal action? And I want to put it right out there that that is something that I think is really important. This is not only does this represent almost $1 million, but then look at how much time is the investment of trying to resolve this, the cachet, the goodwill. If Clean Harbors was going to pay for something, imagine if they paid for something that we really need, rather than something that they didn't ask for and we didn't authorize, but yet it took place. Like, what we could do with $242,000 right now is, rather than pay back money we paid on an unpaid, unrequested detail, I think it's serious. I think it's problematic. It makes me very angry. So I know you don't have a solution for that. I just really wanted to say it. And I don't know where my colleagues are on this piece of it, but if, that's where I stand on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Maglio. And I believe we did get a legal opinion regarding that late breaking today. So it's completely understandable. I truthfully was also working before this meeting and did not have a time to read it. So we can review that either this evening. I think it was well said and certainly merited. So no need to apologize, in my opinion. But we did get a legal opinion, and so we can revisit that later, or I don't know if, we don't have our town solicitor here tonight to answer to it, so I think it'd probably be most appropriate to hold any questions on that opinion, if that's acceptable. Okay, and thank you for the remarks. Any other questions on the revised motion or comments? All right. Councilor Moran.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would move that the sum of $300,000 be transferred from fiscal year 2024 certified free cash to the Fire Department Details Fund, Fund 8910, moving for a favorable recommendation to the full council.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that is unanimous. Thank you for that resolution. I totally forgot about the other thing on the agenda, so so we do have on the agenda, we had talked about early on, I just want to bring this up as a reminder, 01625, Councilor Baraka, FY 2026 budget discussions, revisions, or take up any action relative thereto. So the point of this is really as a reminder, so that if committee members have any amendments they are considering, further questions or callbacks, doesn't need to come before this committee tonight, but we are meeting again tomorrow and next week. But if there are amendments you're considering, please work with Clerk Semino on that, so we aren't taking them up at the very last day without any preparation. Any questions? And I will also let folks know, we do have a running list of questions that we're waiting on answers for. I'm hopeful we can get them before the end of our formal hearings, but we do have a placeholder for callbacks if those questions remain outstanding. Yeah.
So questions that we asked, actually I'm going to direct this to Clerk Semino. So questions that we asked, let's say from one of the other nights, should we check with you to see if there's follow-up happening, or should we request it and write something up and ask for a callback or a memo or something?
Telephone.
If we received a reply, I've already sent it on. But it's always good to put it again in an email, and we can have exactly what you're looking for, and we can forward that on and make sure it's on the list.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you all. That is our last agenda item, so we do need to table item 25018 and just two. Thank you. 01625. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that is unanimous. I want to say thank you so much to BCAM again for doing a extra double duty upstairs in Johnson Chambers tonight to make sure that this meeting is televised and will be recorded. And with that, we will be meeting again tomorrow, Wednesday, May 14th, 2025 at 6:15 p.m. With that, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor to adjourn? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, this meeting is adjourned.